has the recording cut? Because this is the second part, and I want to make sure that it does. Oh, I was doing the wrong thing. This is not what I meant to touch, it was this. Ah, no, it reset. The city timer reset. Okay, basically, what was it doing? Oh yes, I want to check if the file cut. If it did, hello, I'll be getting to you in a moment. I'm just using a new setting, and I want to make sure that I've actually used it correctly, because it's better to know now than know in 25 minutes. And is this approximately 55 minutes? It is 55 minutes, 18 seconds, and 5 gigs of space. Fantastic. Okay, so let's close this. Hello. Basically, in part 1, I showed something that enraged me by Microsoft, where they literally programmed their settings to breed and incentivize a state of captive passivity inside of you, the user. And I walked you through the sneaky little tips and tricks that they used. And it's good to be aware of them, because then you start noticing the patterns. Now, basically, I'm getting to what I originally wanted to do. I wanted to load up Word to bring up the old example and see the new, but basically here we're creating and onboarding my acts protocol, activity calendar tracker, and systems maybe. Yeah, it's the acts. Because like you can do one act, but it's the acts calendar. So we'll make the S a permanent part of the naming nomenclature, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be activity calendar tracker. And if you want it to be a system, you definitely can. So act and acts are maybe two different things. Ooh, interesting. Variations in the acronym do create variants, like with fitness and fit. Functionally incremental training necessitating exercise and strengthening systems versus functionally incremental training. Because the fit test, F-I-T-T-T, lowercase est, is also distinct. Okay, so basically the way that I am seeing it, these acts are regular everyday activities that nourish. In fact, somewhere I made a list. Oh, I know where it's going to be a pain to get right now. Yes, I'm going to go get it. I'll be right back. Alright, just finalizing up the cropping of my new display capture for the horizontal window using the myroad.com board that I had previously made. Oh, also one more thing, yes. Let's also adjust the bottom. That should be sufficient. A little more for good measure. Okay. Now, with this done, basically, let's close this, put this in its correct place. All right. Oh yeah, this is what you look like on the back end. Cool, isn't it? So basically, with this here, let's for the moment disable you. And let's put you where you belong with the others. Beautiful. Okay, so now, oh, that's interesting. That didn't fit. Ah, I understand. Notion, no, OBS sometimes has certain issues that it still has to deal with, in my opinion. Okay, so basically, oh no, that's the wrong thing. Okay, this is the right thing. Not this specifically, more this. Okay, so basically, I don't know if you're familiar with the Pascal's pyramid. A triangle, yes. So Pascal's triangle is a mathematical visualization of numbers that essentially become progressively logarithmically exponential. And it's a really interesting scientific mathematical concept, but there are literal patterns in the information. Now, with this, what you can do is basically create or recreate the strategy, structure, and system, and then attribute them various functions. So, for example, if I were to try and understand my core priorities, my function, wait, standing for wait, what am I doing today? It's a all-in-one built system of which acts as a part. Then it basically goes into the two functions of my brand and my career. So there's human and there's longevity. But the thing is, right now, this is actually somewhat misaligned. So the human brand and the academy are the two things on this side, and then the longevity work needs to come somewhere sprinkled in the middle. So with all of that consideration put in place, it's going to be very important to assess long-term viability of function and form. Meaning, as you go through it, you can basically understand where you want the different aspects of your projects and relationships to be. And if you have more things than fit on this graph, that is a very clear sign that you're probably doing far too much, because even this is a psychotic amount of things to try and do, unless you have a system that basically makes it at least 50% easier, if not up to 10 or even 100 times easier. And within 3 to 7 years of dedicated work, it is entirely legitimately possible to get at a minimum of 10 to 25% as a general operable baseline, if not actually 100. And that can be done in the span of 1 year is unrealistic, but possible. More like 3 to 5 to 7. 3 to 7 years is basically the average range. But ask yourself, are you going to be living for more than 3 months? And if that's the case, then you'll be able to do enough work that it will have been worth the effort and value that it brings, not only to what you're able to do in terms of your interactions with your environment, but also quite literally bond a little something inside the edge of your soul. It's actually quite interesting, but that will be for another day. Now, looking at this is actually a tiny little part of it. Over here, once again, going with Pascal's triangle, each of these numbers has a corresponding value. And if we look over here, I've basically inputted already. So the value of this at the top is 0, and then it's 1. So the actual triangle starts here with these little yellow boxes. Each yellow box represents an actual real place in this mathematically defined triangle. So it starts with 1, but then the 1 is 3 really important active disciplines, using a trick of logic to create a 3 inside of a 1, because you can always do that with any number. But basically here, what's my non-negotiable? 3. Oh, and the reason it's called 0 is because this is actually level 0. Well, some of the call it row 1, but I think it's a lot cleaner if you actually begin on the 0th row. But basically, I don't know, I'm open to modifications. But basically, here's what's non-negotiable. It is 3 really important active disciplines. It's the triad, and basically it's mind, it's body, and soul. So here, basically, I was creating a sort of hygiene calendar, but it could be really interesting to make a fitness tracker for the mind, for the body, and for the soul. So literally, what are the 3 core acts? And when looking at this, it's realizing that this doesn't actually need to be its own dedicated thing. It can be, but you should not have more than 5. And if this is going to be taking up 3, that now is literally 50% of the leftover available slots that you have. Reframing it, putting to that perspective, can help create an impact shift that may not mean much to you, and that is okay. Essentially, it's about understanding the forms and the patterns between what happens and how it happens. So let's say we start with over here, just so that you can see. Let's say we were to start with the body. It's an act of fitness, diet or hygiene, and then stretching, yoga. 3 things that I'd like to do every single day. So a body calendar, that makes a lot of sense. Then inside of it, fitness stands for a program sheet, which is an actual system. Like, for example, I was showing you acts. This is the breakdown visual of weight, but this is fitness, a functionally incremental training necessitating exercise and strengthening systems. It's an actual program. It even has a binder, for God's sakes. This was my calendar for last year. I create systems. I've created many systems. There's more, but I think you get the point. I create systems. I'm very good at creating systems, but I need help assembling them. And so, literally, that's what the Academy is. I'm compiling everything that I have and know into an operational system that essentially gives you a self guided guide to your own individual human experience. It is literally the individualized experience of a spectrum human being. There is a way to visually create a step-by-step guide that is an open-ended map adventure to your own life, like a Mad Lib, but for your operating system settings, where you can literally custom build your operational environment. And I don't know about you, but I find that very cool. And speaking from personal experience, it's also very useful because it makes you incredibly good at making sure that you become incredibly good. Wherever you put your attention, and that is not an exaggeration. I put a lot of effort into meaning what I say. And I mean what I say. It's a lot easier than you think. And as soon as you understand, you will realize that it was easy all along. Until you do, you won't. And that's okay. But then one day, you will. And then you won't. You'll have literally forgotten. But the fact that you were able to do it once means you can do it again. Meaning, you don't have to necessarily wait for it to happen again. You can kind of just close your eyes, meditate into that feeling of self. Visualize one's identity. And map out your consciousness. Not spiritually, unless you want to. And at a certain point, you will want to do something that operates within the same level, area, systems, subsystems, and operational procedures within certain network safety boundary parameters for moderation of outside input, alteration, aggression, subjugation. The word was subjugation, I added. This, basically what I'm doing right now is I'm using words and the construct of time, linear pattern sequence repeating, basically weaving threads, creating braids, something more dense out of filaments of fragments. Because if you take filaments or fragments and then you kind of accept that they're combined together through some kind of gravitational like force of mass, basically just mass, like mass creates density, and density has an effect. So why would there not be mass or density inside a comic book like visualization universe overlay that you add onto your life and your systems? And in so doing, it almost gives you the permission, the internal permission you need to kind of pretend that you're hallucinating and making it an actual type of hallucination, making it legitimate through your ability to disconnect from the need that it has to be legitimate. Reverse engineering your way to the solution you've wanted all along, essentially. And this is fascinating because once you get into the practice of doing this on a regular basis, you realize things are actually a lot simpler than you thought. Like, really, really quite simple. And it's remarkable. Now, when looking at all of this, I get the impression that I'm trying very hard to create something very good. And because of it, it's also becoming too complex. And I lose people. I've probably already lost you a few times. And a big part of that is on me. I do need to and am and will continue to learn and refine how to communicate, how to articulate these concepts, because this might be difficult to imagine. I promise you it is of greater difficulty. It is a significantly greater challenge by at least one order of magnitude. Representing the belief and the hallucination of a hallucination, creating an operational framework for inner visualization, hijacking the brain's ability to dream and have internal visualizations before the development of the prefrontal cortex. Because we have to remember, it's not subconscious. It's perpetual. It is the instinct. It's literally hardwired into our bodies and every nerve and every skin cell. And what's interesting is that the disconnection we have from our bodies, realizing that we are as much our health, our gut microbiomes as our brains, is that it gives us permission to ignore the health of the whole so long as we prioritize the comfort, or most often the avoidance, and we confuse them to be the same thing, of the self, the heightened intellectual frontal cortex. But let me ask you a question. If at first we develop just base instinctual genetically programmed reaction, basically just automatons, then we evolve into these synthetic android-like things with subroutines and programs, but ultimately very animalistic. And then you have a higher order of being, capable of complex analysis. Think whales, octopus, humans, certain types of apes, many types of apes, certain types of birds, corvids especially, and many more. But essentially having a conscious overlay of identity, of fear, of capacity, of bond, of loss, of grief, of joy, of play, of trust, of heartbreak, of anger, of fear, of death. And through our collective fear of death, we are united in one thing. We are currently alive to be afraid of death. And while useful in the right context and the right circumstances, it doesn't have to be useful. It can just be. So basically, if we were to return this and shrink that just a tiny poo, then bring this just a little down, and then you here, what can we do with you? Something like that. Oh wait, no, I'm not really using this page. So I can actually kind of just do an overlay. Hey, beautiful. Okay, so now here, I made the cool shower calendar, and I will continue with this because I do think it's important. However, this entire page is something that I will want to copy over. I'm just seeding them. That way, if they're necessary, they will be used. Oh, wait. It hasn't been updated. It's still 2025. Or is it? It might actually not be. I might have just copied the overlaying header. Wednesday. Oh no. Oh, that sucks. When downloading a Microsoft Word calendar template online, is there a way to modify the year in the system settings or to create a new page that has them? Because I realized the one that I'm using, although it's opened in 2026, it gave me the 2025 model. And the thing is, I know there actually is the system because I used it 2 or 3 years ago, but it's been 2 or 3 years. And I did not have access to the system 2 or 3 years ago. See, AI, it is very easy to get lost in hating AI, but as you do that, you are also going to be removing from yourself all of its perks. And the people who do not want your best interest will, you can rest assured, be using every single advantage at their disposal, including this. And if you're not even there to have the conversations to understand what's happening, what's being regulated, how can you have a voice? And so the thing is, it's an incredibly useful tool. It just has to be used in a way that heightens and complements the human experience, not one that sedates it. So, I used to be able to do this. That's unfortunate. And the fact that they're offering a calendar template that doesn't automatically look at what year your system is, or doesn't even have a convenient way to say, okay, well, I want to continue this one. Let's now add in the next year, add in the next year, or even calculate what would it look like at this time and simply make it an algorithm baked into the program, having that be fully customizable to individuals who want to change the format and just drag around certain table properties. That's what we could be doing, but no, the word that we're using is 30 years out of date with the modern network infrastructure that is, well, 30 years of predatory real world market experience. That's what we're living in. We've traded 30 years of progress for 30 years of captivity. That's different. That's very different. And this is also incredibly disappointing. But I thought there was a version. Am I just going crazy? I could swear there was a way. Updates. No. Is there something specifically because this is a calendar? There should be something. If memory serves, there really should be something. Let's see. Table design, no, it wouldn't be here. Editing, no. So if we go out of here, file, no. Home. This is very strange because I really legitimately remember there being a way to change it. I did it years ago, unless I manually change all of them. But right now it seems like we are at manually changing all of them. So what I'm going to be doing is deleting all the extra calendars that I made, because clearly we're going to have to be recopying a much better one. Oh, actually, assuming I didn't do any other changes, I can just undo, 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 undo. And now we're back at 1. Cool. Okay. Ooh, went a little too far. Perfect. Okay, so now going over here, let's look. Actually, I'm not going to be recording while doing this because that's going to be tiring as hell, but I'm going to go and rework these. So see you in a bit. Actually, I'm going to record this. I'm listening to something. I'm not necessarily going to be doing anything, but I'm putting it here. It's going to harm retention, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care. I'm doing it for the sake of archival. I just want you to be able to see how I work and skip ahead once you're ready. And after this, we'll run a test. So January, February starts with the first and 8, 15, 22. Yeah. And then 29, 30, and oh no, it's true, just 28. Oh damn. Love when things work out. And that makes sense because here starts at 1. So 1, 8, 15. Wait, that's March. Oh no, it's 1, 8, 15, 22 again. Wow. It's almost as if having 28 days in a calendar, approximately a menstrual and lunar cycle. Well, it's funny that those two things are tied together. It'd be really interesting if we had a little update to the calendar system and we added a 13th month. And while we're at it, let's also correct some of the other things. Technically, there's a tiny little error in what became the calculation for the metric system, so it's technically a little bit off, and it's going to be a lot easier to fix right now while we're on one planet instead of a multi-planetary empire, that blah 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 blah. So we should get to that sooner rather than later, but we don't have to, and the fact that we almost certainly won't is going to be one of many indicators that's going to go on a very big list that basically just archives the state of the world as it is, and its intended function will not be made super apparent for the next 15 to 25 years. However, I promise you that its existence 25 years from now will quite literally go on to revolutionize the way that we operate as a species, and I say that with no exaggeration. In fact, I am underselling it because if I were to actually describe it the way that I feel it inside, you would dismiss it out of hand. I promise you. So on that note, now that I've had fun with the system, I will pause it because I'm glad to have discovered a more efficient way of going about this. Have yourself a wonderful little microsecond while I pause and unpause. Or is this the time to maybe transition to something new? No, we will pause. But know that I am getting progressively more high, and it's not necessarily what I intended to do on recording tonight. So we will see where this goes. However, thank you very much for being around. Oh, a thought came to mind, and it makes me realize I'm kind of in a catch-22. Because on one hand, a feeling came up, and I realized it was due to a major insecurity just eating away, festering inside. Whereas, if I were to avoid it, on one hand, I wouldn't be feeding it, but I also wouldn't be holding myself accountable. If I acknowledge it, then I am giving in to temptation and weakness instead of embracing the inner resilience that is doing it on your own. And both have their merit depending on what one intends to do with the outcome. And right now, I'm realizing that it is to my benefit, at least in this state, in this way, to express it differently. We underestimate collectively how much control we have over our internal environment. And in conscious awareness, for example, of current energy levels and its impact on body positioning, everything from voice control and modulation to the energy and attention behind the eyes, the way that certain muscles are or are not being used, creating literal changes in the musculature, changing the activation and blood flow to your region, everything from posture. Every aspect that you can think of and every aspect you are not thinking of has an impact on how you operate. You can learn to operate by making actual changes. You can also learn to operate by reducing and removing inner complexity to simplify the outcome. And with that lovely little goal, everything kind of becomes easier. And that's really cool. That's very cool, I find. And It's exciting, isn't it? Huh. That's one hell of a tangent I'm going on. I'm thinking about Toastmasters and organizational executive member training, creating potential recruitment problems and long term. Basically, Toastmasters is dying, and it's gonna evolve into something because it technically is now too big to die. It will become something. But what that something is, it has basically everything has three likely paths and then a bunch of others. But the three paths, or at least the ones that I see, are interesting. But that is a complete tangent. Toastmasters is a public speaking organization that I'm a part of, and it has been monumentally effective at helping to hone my ability to communicate in a more precise way. However, it is also fair to say that much of my linguistic prowess came before Toastmasters. I simply learned to refine it into a higher state of polish and elegance. And yet the underlying nature was present for years, for decades, actually. Anyways, so when you become aware of the inner settings and you start flipping the switches, turning the knobs, activating and closing circuits, and kind of fucking with the inner machinery, you start learning how to take care of your own engine and your own operating system, and you start learning how to read the patterns. Eventually you think, oh my god, it's kind of like computer code, and then eventually you start trying to find patterns in the code. Then you kind of do, but it's only the kind of patterns that you see when you're basically zoned out and using your peripheral vision, which actually thinks at a faster response than your conscious mind. Because it doesn't have to think, it just intuits to a highly tuned degree, literally made and optimized to optimize. We are humans, Huemans. We are hues. We are built with an innate capacity drive to take on basically any shape and any color in any environment, and that is our evolutionary advantage. We weren't the only species of humans for hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions of years, and yet now we are. Partly because they died out, didn't survive certain pressures, they were less or more creative, and also, we kind of bred at least one of them out of existence, and the chances are if we did it with one, we probably did it with several others. Meaning, there might actually be a legitimate conversation about the genetics of a particular culture and environment, especially if they come from cultures that are highly tribal and cohesive, or at least dense, which becomes the same thing through the sheer friction. But I digress. It's possible for you to be literally everything you want to be and more. And everything that you don't realize you don't want to be is actively doing you a disservice in terms of the development and propagation of your consciousness. So now I want to be very clear. The Academy isn't made. I don't like selling because that's not what I'm doing. And so I avoid pitching at all. And that is a detriment because I literally do not then get to practice selling, which is not inherently a bad thing, but I've been conditioned to feel like it is, which is interesting. But basically, as I say the following, I am not attempting to sell you on my program, my academy, my systems, my mission. No, 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 no. Human, the brand, Human is built around the idea that we are literally a diverse spectrum hue, creating an individualized collective of humanity, of which you are human. And that can mean as much or as little as you want it to. And that is your part in the spectrum. Cool. If someone has to fill the slot, I'm glad it's you. And if it's not you, then maybe we should free up that spot for someone who actually would use that slot for the betterment of their consciousness, of their very being. And you don't even have to use this in a spiritual context if that gets to you. It's literally just the internal alignment to a status of peace and equilibrium. And invoking it with certain mystical spiritual elements can definitely heighten the experience. Definitely. but not irreplaceably so. And that's actually one of my gripes with religion. It's very useful. It's also a cultural safety net, but it doesn't have to be true to be effective. And we see that because every religion, basically in one way or another, must require the contradiction of that which came before. Meaning, for every religion to be right, every single religion needs to be wrong. And once every single religion is wrong, what's left? What is the one thing every single one of them had in common? Not more, just literally one. And the only answer that I can logically find to this, and it's beautifully simple, this is a sequence. It's an equation, kind of. No, no, yeah. Because I stopped to backtrack and justify myself that, yeah, that was an insecurity move, which drew my attention away from what I wanted, meaning I literally lost my train of thought because I stopped to question whether or not I should present myself through evocatively anxious means to convey pseudo humility to you to deflect from my inner visualization of your judgment as to the way that I'm currently communicating, creating self sabotage, leading to me feeling vulnerable. Vulnerable. Leading to me feeling vulnerable, 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 leading to vulnerability, leading to such an overwhelming amount of vulnerability it is baffling. Learning to understand, learning to understand, learning to understand, finding what means and what makes and what breaks, understanding everything. Oh, clever, clever, clever. It's hard to describe that I'm quite literally having a controlled projector like green room hallucination of a comic book environment in which I use the contours of pixel blobs to create system hierarchy upon which I attribute an outline that I then plug into the hallucination matrix to generate an approximation of what all those inner components in that sequence would take as a form, which then becomes an idea concept marker, which gets classified. And over time, as dozens or hundreds, or technically at this level of processing, which I don't mean high processing, I mean low processing, to the point where because I'm not having to pay attention to basically any single point, I'm kind of just observing everything, which means I can go from a single focus point of one to essentially a focus point of hundreds of billions or trillions of particles. It's kind of like how many atoms there are in your hand, and yet very few of them are required to actually hold density. Same thing here. A focus act of will, like a person who aligns 100 inner components, will go on to quite literally be remembered for several generations, if not thousands of generations. And historically, we've often called people who either get there or get very close saints and prophets and kings and things of that nature. Devils. My gripe with religion is that it's not required. Like, don't get me wrong, it's useful. And it's required in the sense that not having it would be a disadvantage to our species. So it's actually good that we have a religious drive. And it's also good that we have an inner drive to find equilibrium so that when religion overpowers, secularism overpowers, which then causes religion to overpower to retake the stability of the environment that was lost to the economic gain of progress. But basically, war has casualties, but it also innovates. And so the problem is that we've kind of found a way to create an automated version of segmented human consciousness and cultural development, generational cultural development through the selective harvesting of suffering. And it works. Dictatorships work. They get a bad rap because, well, I mean, they're bad, but so's this. And definitely one of them is probably better than the other in certain circumstances, but it's kind of a self-deception to have to pretend that one or the other is correct. Sometimes both can be wrong and there's another answer, and usually that is the case. In fact, not 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. Probably statistically, no more than 95 out of 100. Like, really, no more than 95. It's actually kind of scary. Um, uh, we don't really operate at 1% of our potential. Most people don't operate at 1%. I'm currently not at 1%, I think. I'm close. I used to be at 0.6 about a year and a half ago. I think now I'm at 0.7. Maybe point. Well, I'm getting close to 0.8. I'm not functional right now, and I need help. Basically, that's what the Ko-Fi page. So there's a difference between two of my projects. One is two ways of crowdfunding. One is Ko-Fi, one is the Academy. Ko-Fi is basically, here's the mission. If you want to support, honestly, that'd be really cool. I'm basically literally making a list of all the people who are supporting me through that means, and what I cannot give now to the people who are of help will be paid back in kind. And that flexibility will allow for the increase and development of the external systems, such as one of them being the Academy, where I'm centralizing so many of these templates and concepts and journals and papers and documents and literal conditioning templates. And so, so much more. Nope. Many, many, many pages. By the way, I include caffeine, I include medication. If I take shots, I'll literally list the individual shots. If I smoke weed, I'll usually have the individual lines as well. Oh yeah, something that I wanted to mention earlier, just as an aside. This is actually the part where I doubled back to wonder whether or not it would be weakness to do or weakness not to do. A recall of approximately 20-25 minutes. But basically, I realized, it's slipping because once again, I stopped to justify myself. It's interesting that this idea and several others cause me to automatically avoid. That's weird. That's very weird. That's happening more often than I'd like. Far more often than I'd like. Oh, and I could have just copied this one because they're currently kind of identical. Oh, that is absolutely fascinating. And the 31st would end on a Tuesday, which is correct. Meaning this actually does work. Wow. Okay, I'm impressed. We're very lucky with the way that the calendar turned out this year. I was expecting to have to do a lot more copy pasting, but no, we got very lucky. Very cool. Oh. Yeah, basically, as you can see, there's a lot of ways that this mindset framing can be used. It really depends on the end goals of the user. And ultimately, I think that's one of the hardest things to convey to people. You are capable, and I'm not saying this as like blah blah faux cheeriness optimism. I'm trying to convince you to buy my course because I'm not. I should be, and I'm not. That's actually kind of the problem. I'm trying to do too much for free at high individualized quality instead of actually focusing on a target market that allow me to have enough revenue to learn the basic principles of business, to create enough of a reputation and a following and an audience in order to then use that availability of resources to build a team that learns from my errors and my systems where when working together, we create a compendium resource master archive tool that is founded on the concept of not a fiduciary responsibility to stakeholders, but an ethical responsibility to the individuals who purchase or use the system. Being part of the system actually will grant you a certain level of proactive rights and autonomy. I'm not even kidding. There's literally a way to divide political and economic projects into four spheres and, well, technically more, but a way to basically grant executionary power on certain things. So some of the companies that I've already planned, for example, some out of these three, I would say two of them would be co-ops and one of them would be a partial co-op. But basically, there's also plans on turning specific projects and companies into co-ops, the ways to do that, how to make them independent from myself, how to link them into a human network. Literally 6.5 to 8,000 hours of work in the last 5.5 years, 2,500 to 3,000 hours of audio and video, recorded logs and contents and notes and archives, 18 journals in this primary series, dozens of journals everywhere else, thousands of pages, thousands, if not potentially 10,000 images, thousands of documents, dozens of projects, hundreds of, at least 100 planned projects, 1,000 years of 10 generations of 100 years planned out as the Millennium Initiative, a project that is going to be released in 2050 with a timer clock, basically another 25-ish years, 24 and counting. That is what is coming for us. And it's hard to explain to people just how much there is to see, because when you see all of this, it literally becomes not overwhelming, that's the wrong word. Think of me right now in this state as autistic. It will help you understand. Literally, right now, for the sake of this conversation, I am on the spectrum. And I'm not exaggerating for the sake of effect. I'm in a very vulnerable headspace. And by allowing myself to communicate that to you, I am giving myself permission to exist in this modular mindset that comes out a lot under the effect of either psychedelics or largely cannabis and cannabinoid type products. I'm not stopping myself right now, not masking, and masking a little bit. I did not intend to put on the mask again, and yet here we are. During the last 45 to 60 seconds that you have just witnessed, or maybe no, technically, depending, it was a gradual incline. So that could be anywhere from 30 seconds to 90 seconds to 300, and then 300 to 500. Let's go to 500. Nice clean number. 500, 1,000, then 500, 5,000, and then 5,000, 10,000, and so forth and so on. In that moment of time, I was legitimately very on the spectrum. I functionally autistic. When I was very young, I did I literally spent close to a decade, the first 8 to 12 years of my self-aware life. So let's call that 4.5 to 4.5 to 13, maybe 14. I was very deep in the self-modification, introspection, modeling world. And I got very good at modifying basically any trait of the human experience, adapting new interests or tastes, lessening behavioral responses, programming into self an actualized drive. How interesting. How very interesting. Circling back to something that I was mentioning, where I was explaining the difference between Ko-Fi and the Academy. Ko-Fi is a token of support. It's literally a token of support. And there are options for everyone, including the options of not paying. For those who value the project and the method, I encourage and recommend a truly authentically curious introspection into the very depths of every single element that you have used to define and cement your identity. Are you afraid of anything? And if your answer is anything other than no, what are you lying to yourself about? And why were you not able to turn off the filter that created the lie? And if you're not able to find it to be a lie, then wow, it is an honor to meet an enlightened one. I mean, that is a claim that you can make. But understanding, enlightenment, the word is loaded. Ignore the Western perspective. The state of completeness to the point where there is no need to be ofness, allowing you to disconnect from need, allowing you to not literally require that your operating system be based off of need, facilitating empathetic responses, increasing behaviors like patience, introspection, self awareness, doubt. And once again, a bit of an issue. This is where I come into conflict with the concept of religion because it works. But just because something works does not mean it is inherently correct. And when you have many different religions and they all essentially contradict each other, and everyone thinks they're right, and they all have the same reason for thinking that they're right, when they close their eyes and they feel it, they know that it's true. It's almost as if, as a human, you are a biologically optimized creature of internal hallucinatory potential to literally weave together a reality in front of your face. Because here's the thing, I don't know if you've ever looked into this or seen it, but there's ways of finding the chinks in the armor. One way is to basically hold up a pencil or a finger, and at one point you'll literally see that where the cable connects to the optic nerve, basically there's no cones or rods or anything in the back end. And so basically your brain is just continuously filling in a tiny little spot. I forget exactly where it is, but somewhere at some point my fingertip would disappear. I forget exactly where it is. Maybe something with more of a cap. Okay. It helps when you know where you're looking. But there's this, so literally your brain will fill in information for you. Another one is, let's say you are looking across the room, like literally your eyes are just moving across. What happens if you look at someone doing it, their eyes flicker like this, but your brain has auto smoothing, so basically it'll add a layer of rendering. And it's kind of like how with artificial intelligence you can actually take live video feed and make slight modifications to it, so it's like, well, a filter basically. Your brain has a filter for reality, because in reality you're seeing the impact of light onto molecules, organically constructed molecule based systems that transmit that through the optic nerve into your nervous and neural system. From there your brain synthesizes a pattern out of the impacts and signals of light to allow for a digital inner recreation of an overlay of its best approximation of the environment as dictated by evolutionary pressures and biology. And voila. Do your eyes have the ability to see a higher spectrum? If you're not a bird, probably not. Do you have the ability to see thermal or heat vision? Probably not. Do you have the ability to see in the dark? Not as well as we could. You have the ability to see well on land. Actually, not really, because our eyes were originally designed for water and the change kind of fucked with us. Kind of like going bipedal. Technically, our basins were originally evolved to be a lot more stable when walking on all fours. So that's why we, as apes that stand up, actually have a high rate of back and knee problems, because we're not supposed to use them like that. And even the fact that we're not always using our elbows means that we are much weaker in our upper torso, which is why things like push-ups are so important, because they literally get you back on the ground and using your body the way that it is required to hold itself into place. If you don't have the muscle mass to hold your body into place, you are basically fucking yourself. And that's interesting to me. But a lot of things are interesting to me. You are as complete as you want to be, and that will always be the case. So the Academy is essentially my attempt at creating literal thousands of hours of work and condensing it into a system that gives you an open-ended guide and map to your own human experience. I'm not telling you who you should be. I'm teaching you how to build a mirror, and then I'm leaving it up to you whether or not you want to put it to your own face. Or break it into tiny little pieces and cut your wrist with it. That is not my call to make. You have the privilege and responsibility of your own self-care. I care for you, but you must unconditionally care for yourself. Even if that means giving yourself patience and permission to not always be perfect, especially when it might be to the lapsing and waning ability to continue a state of perfect mastery. Because that will not happen, and you will need to learn to forgive yourself, and that will be okay. But basically, there's a lot of ways to go around this, and the reason for the Academy is basically to help you process and understand the implications of being quite literally as powerful as you could be. I personally find that to be a most thrilling concept, but not everyone shares my jubilation. 19. Let's try to learn to write with a keypad without looking directly at the keypad. So that would be 3. That would be 10. That would be 17. Ooh. 7. Huh. Interesting. Basically, this is brain training. It's like doing the mental math first and then checking with a calculator. It's the ability to learn to learn. Oh, I really like this actually. It's a really good brain exercise because it forces you to learn in real time. And also right now, because I am under the effect of cannabis, I am technically a little bit more cognitively plastic. And yet in reality, we're always basically in a permanent state of neuroplasticity. We just choose to down-regulate it, or at least we don't realize that we're down-regulating it by accident, which again, super fascinating as far as a concept goes, but holy shit, is that kind of, I don't know, freaky? But again, maybe that's just me. I'd like to think that it wouldn't be, though. So that's basically the Academy. The Academy as a goal is to centralize all my systems on a personal note, get user feedback and experience off of you to see what works, what doesn't, what do you like, and then literally work with you on streams, or for example, we do a more advanced and more concentrated, more sober version of this. But yeah, basically I build systems for myself to function, and I'd like to know what systems you would actually need and want to function, and then build that with you. And then not sell it to you, work with you so that you and I can both be using the product. 13, 20, 27. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, this is actually really fun. And once you get over that initial hurdle of imposter-esque syndrome, you actually really start enjoying life to a much greater degree, because you realize you're basically always you always have access to this state. The ability to improve upon yourself, to create more from less, to become anything and everything you want. Now I'm just going to go and check to confirm that this was actually good. Let's go all the way to July. So July starts on a Wednesday and it ends on a Friday. Yes. And now let's go to November. November ends on a Monday and starts on a Sunday. Ooh. Oh, glad I did that. Oh, what the fuck? Let's just copy a few numbers. Place that here. Huh. Well, that sure is odd. Let's instead not butcher the formatting. Put that here. And then 29, 30, and then 31. No 31, just 30. And then starting Sunday, ending Monday. Perfect. And then December, the last little one. Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday, Thursday. Perfect. So now that we have the year, we can actually start building out on this. And start building out these non-negotiables. So, taking a look, we can already basically block out a fair portion of January. So the way that I like to do it is, because I want to still be able to use it, because I do know some of the things that I did over the last few days, but I don't necessarily remember everything. So by doing it in this, oh wait, no, sorry. I ended up highlighting the wrong thing. That's not what I intended to do. Am I able to? You silly thing. Okay, fine. Let's start with this. So what I wanted to do actually was not this, it was the strike through. And then over here, same thing, strike through. So by striking it through, I have the ability to see that part of this month was not done. So I wasn't really starting here. However, if I want to add something retroactively, marker will still, like felt marker will definitely work on this canvas. And I just want to confirm 31, 28, 31, 30, 30. Okay, so now let's see for May, because we might have some general issues. May has 31, so that's no good. May's, oh, Saturday. Oh, no, May's not correct. No. Okay, so I will have to review these, and that's going to be more of a focused work, so I'll go back to this, I'll pause it, but I might see you in a few minutes. However, I get the impression that as soon as I find something, I'll pop back in, show what I'm doing, and then we'll split the recording to continue and make that segmented by the hour-ish. All right, so if you look at the top over here, there's going to be a screen capture of my browser, so you'll be able to see how much time has passed in real time on my end. I should be getting to bed quite soon, so basically I'll show you what I've created. Over here, I have essentially multiple calendars. Let's change the view. Oh no, if we go to 2 view, that should be fine. Yeah. Okay, so basically I made 4 calendars. One is specifically, it's outside of the triad. So the triad is body, mind, and soul. Here, it is specifically acts of cold and showers. So basically it tracks when I take cold showers, when I take warm showers, when I take an ice plunge or bath, and then when none are completed, or when it leads to an inevitable hygiene issue because none have been completed. For the acts of body, for the activity calendar tracker systems of body, it is fitness, a custom program that I actually have here. Basically tracking your fitness on a way of function. So elixir / nutrition, Morning elixirs and meal elixirs are something that I'm developing. Then there's also movement or yoga, basically just literally movement. Could be going outside for a walk, stretching your body, whatever that means. And uncompleted, or, ooh, I'm going to be, oops, no. Let's make a minor correction, because that is incorrecto. And let's add a little bit of space. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And we can put this back up. Perfect. Okay. Because the thing is, in some cases, if I have a hygiene issue, it's because I did none of these activities. If I have a body or discomfort pain, I can still have done other things. So I don't want to hide the data either. And then for the other two, it's an act of soul. So basically, or service or self, whatever S word you want to use. And it's meditation, a light, morning light, so sunlight, or it's an internalized ritual performed to align yourself and set your intentions, a morning mantra. And then Marxist care. Care being another system. Basically, I was going to be working on it today, but I'm running out of time, so I'll go to bed instead. But it's something that I would like to do. Okay, Google, set a reminder for tomorrow morning that I have to update the CARE document. Beautiful. After coming from Siri, this is amazing. Now, none completed, dysphoric mode. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so basically, am I meditating, all doing all that, and then for the acts of mind, reading, active learning, or training. Here I would like to put the. I had it before, but basically the reason that I took it off is because it shrinks it too much. So here's what we'll do instead. Let's see if we can try this out. No. What happens with this? Still a little too much. Ooh, perfect. In fact, we can even do this. Hey, buddy. Hello. I'll open the door for you. Oh, no, I can't because I'm making sound. But this is almost to its conclusion. Anyways, I want to primarily be able to show you this work because I think it's very interesting and compelling. It shows you that measurement always improves performance, and this is literally taking an act of measure. The acts with an S are these individual systems. The act is the act of measurement. And so act and acts are two different things. And the yeah, no, they're two different things. It's very interesting. Okay, so with this in mind, let's print it and then let's go to bed. Oh, here it had a template, but this can be removed because it's out of date. And the rest, perfect. In the same way that here I had one that's not a triad, I'll almost certainly be making more. But at this point in time, it's unknown what those are going to be. And so for the time being, we are keeping it. What the hell? Okay. Oops. Nope. I wanted to put it here, actually. Yep, on the inside. That way we follow the pattern. We'll get there eventually. Have no fear, superpowered underwear is here. Comics were so interesting. It's a shame that the concept of scholastics will no longer happen. Not like it used to. Not until we take phones out of... because the thing is, the communication device is important, but our phones are basically addiction bricks, and that's a problem. That is a very big problem, and we're not doing ourselves any service. All right, I'm going to print this and go to bed. Thank you so much for popping in. If you're curious about more of this, I'll be sharing some in the coming days and weeks. I am also literally working to centralize this amongst so many. Like, this is one template of one system. It's half of it because there's also ACT. That's the act of measuring. But basically, there's also all of these. And legitimately, there is more than you think contained in this document. For example, for fun. Oh, no. Let's take a look at... Motherfuck. Do I have the wrong... Ah, it's Alt. Nice. Yeah, it's the result of a lot of work. This and more coming to the Academy. I look forward to doing this together. Wherever you are, whoever you are, may you have a good day, a good evening, and or a good night, and take care.